Located just down the road from the soccerplex, Phillips Farm produce stand is a well-known landmark to people living in the Germantown area. Folks come from all over to buy the fresh produce, pet the animals, and feed the chickens. What you may not know is Jean Phillips hails from a long line of farmers who've worked the land all over Montgomery County. Jean can trace her ancestors in this county to the early 1700s. Through the years, most were either farmers or connected to farming in some way. Her father's family was the King family, who settled and farmed in Cedar Grove. To this day, the Kings continue to work the original farmstead. Her father, Herbert King, moved away, settling in Germantown.
A long tradition in I guess, Old English families is that the younger son moves on to some other area and the older son inherits the home place. So when my father got married, my grandparents helped him buy a farm here in Germantown, which was the Richter farm. He bought that in 1933, and then he bought the John Snyder farm in 1944, and then he bought the farm that we're actually on right now in 1946. And the three of them together were about 575 acres. And then my earliest memory is that he not only farmed those farms, but he also farmed others in the neighboring area. And it wasn't unusual for him to be farming up around 1,000 acres and running 3 or 4 dairy herds of 60 cows each.
Herbert King was a true entrepreneur. Among other things, he hauled milk all over the Washington, D.C. area. At first, the milk was transported in cans. Then, in 1954, he introduced the first tank truck after convincing the other farmers to switch. Childhood on the farm stirs up happy memories for Jean.
Well, growing up on a farm, at least for me, I thought was a lot of fun because I got out and was more involved in the farm. I had a sister who stayed more in the house, but I had chickens that were mine to tend to, and I sold the eggs, and I also had a garden. Well, I started gardening when before I went to elementary school. My parents had a big garden. Everybody in those days had a big garden because you couldn't just rush right out to the grocery store and buy a lot of stuff. It wasn't available. And during the winter, a lot of things weren't available. So if you wanted them, you had to can them or freeze them during the summer.
Jean didn't plan on continuing in her father's footsteps. After college, she spent 10 years at NIH working as a research immunologist. However, after the birth of her second child, she saw the advantages of returning to the farm.
Most children never get to see their parents except when they're relaxing. They never get to see them work. They never get to see how hard they work. And the other thing I think that you learn on a farm real quick is that if you don't work, it doesn't happen. And you don't get paid or you don't eat. You know, if you don't take care of the garden, you don't have it in the wintertime. And I think that association is often lost today because we segregate our good time and our work, particularly for our kids. They don't get to see both sides of us.
In the 1980s, dairy farming was hurting due to the national milk surplus. So Jean and her husband turned to the straw business. Over time, they added produce, which today is their main focus. However, very little of it is raised in Germantown. Of the original 575 acres, the Phillips now own about 25 altogether. Most of the land is now nearly developed as Germantown continues to grow. Jean says the trend began as soon as the first few residents began to move in.
I guess I'm surprised at the number of people that come out here early on. They came out, they bought property here because they liked what the farm ground looked like. But I don't mean to be unkind, but those people didn't really want the farm experience. What they wanted was a picture window. They wanted to see cows, but they didn't want the cows to ever get out or, for heaven's sake, stink anywhere near them. They wanted to see tractors, but only in the field. They didn't want you to move equipment on the roads. And above all, they didn't want you to sell the farm to let anybody else come. They were there, and they wanted it to stay exactly how it was when they got there. Yet they were the main reasons that farming had to leave, because You can't farm next to people who don't want you to move equipment and don't want you to have animals and don't want you to make noise early in the morning or late at night. Don't want you to run grain dryers because it makes too much noise. You can't farm.
Today, Phillips Farm does most of their growing in Frederick County. Their fresh produce is sold in area grocery stores as well as at their farm stand. Jean reminds us that we all rely on the modern-day farmer.
During the Revolutionary War, 1 person in 8 was a farmer. And a lot of those 8 that were not farmers were his family. Today, 1 person in about 130 farm in this country. And that allows 129 people to go out and be doctors, lawyers, road engineers, trash collectors, teachers, whatever they want to be. And that's, I think, the greatest thing about the American farm is that we have freed so many people to go do all the other wonderful things that they need to do.
And just why is it that the Phillips Farm produce stand is so very popular?
A generation ago, most of the people worked off the farm, but they at least had grandparents that were still farming, so they could take the kids out there on weekends or in the summer and get a flavor of what farms were like. But today, that just doesn't happen with such a small number of people farming. So having a place like this that's open to the public, where they can come and see animals and have some feeling of, I guess it's nostalgia, of what life was like on a farm.
He did see me, didn't he? Come here!